Yo, what's going on, YouTube? And welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy, Kevin Forte. First off, I want to say Happy Easter to everybody that celebrates. Happy, what is it? I guess Passover. That was celebrated on Friday, so happy Passover to you guys. Um, so let's get into the Sharks. So the San Jose Sharks, unfortunately, have been eliminated from the 2022 Stanley Cup playoffs. What does this mean for the San Jose Sharks moving forward? Obviously, Doug Wilson stepping down has changed sort of the mentality of the Sharks, and we could see some big changes in the organization. And we take a look back. We reflect on what happened this season for the Sharks, why they didn't finish where they wanted to, which is ideally a playoff spot. We'll go over all of that today. So let's start off with some little bit of stats and some history. So the San Jose Sharks are now going to miss their third consecutive season of Stanley Cup playoff hockey. So for 3 straight seasons, the San Jose Sharks have not made the Stanley Cup playoffs. Obviously, the last time they made the playoffs was back in 2018, which was that run they went to the Western Conference Final. And the expectation was they would be back next year, right? Kind of similar to the New York Islanders right now in that same sort of sense, right? You expected them to be back next year. That's not necessarily the case, especially in today's NHL landscape, how competitive it is. It's very difficult to make that Final Four again and again. And unfortunately, the Sharks have come nowhere near close. They have missed the playoffs all 3 seasons since that run. And that is actually the longest playoff drought in the San Jose Sharks franchise history. They've had 2 separate times where they've missed the playoffs in 2 consecutive seasons. But other than that, the Sharks have been a playoff team for the most part. So this is kind of new territory for the Sharks, as well as a new, a new GM coming in. They have an interim GM right now. There's a lot of things in flux right now in San Jose, and quite fittingly, pun intended here, a changing of the tide in San Jose for the Sharks. So what went wrong for the Sharks this season? We'll start there. So the San Jose Sharks didn't have a terrible season in the sense that they were just a really bad team. I hate to say it, I think the Pacific Division was maybe better than I think the San Jose Sharks fan base and really most of the NHL had predicted. A lot of people would have predicted that the Sharks would be at least in the conversation of making the playoffs this year, which for the most part they did. We're into April now and they've been eliminated. But their record just hasn't been that great, and their stats have not been stellar. You look at their goals for this season, and that's where really they've been hurt this season. They are 29th in the NHL out of 32. They have 190 goals for this season. Their goals against isn't much better, just a little bit better. Their goals against, they've given up 234 goals. That's right, they are a minus in the goal differential this season. They are 19th in the NHL in that category. So they're actually better in terms of their defense than their offense this year. And I think most people in San Jose, and I think around the league, that was the criticism of the Sharks, is where their goal is going to come from this year. And I think that was kind of on full display this season. Now, the usual suspects led the team in points this year. Timo Meier, Tomas Hertl, and Logan Couture. But from there, things kind of dip off, and you start to see Alex Barbanov, who had 37 points. That's still very good, but again, when you consider the guy with the 4th most points on the team, he's played 65 games this season. He only has 37 points. Again, it's not bad, but you need more depth scoring. And then you look even further than that. You look at Jonathan Dahlin, Nick Bonino, Rudolph Balcers, Noah Gregor, Matt Nieto. Those guys weren't getting enough points depth-wise for the Sharks. And I think the combination of just maybe missing another key piece in that top 6 and the lack of depth, the Sharks were going to struggle this season. And you look at their defense, a lot of people would argue this may be one of the most overpaid defenses in the league. And I think Sharks fans would probably agree with me on that for the most part. I mean, Brent Burns, yeah, he put together a pretty solid campaign. But again, he's definitely regressed a little bit. You look at guys like Erik Karlsson, he had a little bit of a bounce back season from where he's been. But again, that's not good enough. Now you're starting to see guys like Vlasic kind of fall off. And you're seeing some of the younger guys come into the fold, like Jacob Middleton, Nicholas Milosh, Mario Ferraro. You're starting to see some of those guys start to round out their defense. And then you've got some other guys that are just injured. Radim Shimmick, Kevin LeBanc. That's a huge goal scorer for the Sharks. Losing LeBanc for a lot of this season, that's going to hurt, right? Nikolai Nijov, goaltending, Aiden Hill being out. That doesn't help, right? That's a good goalie that you have not in your lineup. Yona Gajovic and John Leonard. I mean, losing all those guys, again, that's depth. And the Sharks, to begin with, don't have the best depth. So now you factor that Kevin LeBanc, who is that top 6 goal scorer, missing, and the fact that their depth was injured, you could chalk it up to just, bad luck and the wrong guys getting injured at the wrong time. But at the end of the day, that's kind of how the league works. And unfortunately, the Sharks were in a position where their division is much more competitive than we expected, and they just weren't able to keep up with some of those better teams in front of them. But for the most part, though, I think this is where, honestly, I expected the Sharks to be. And unfortunately, that is a non-playoff team. And you look at the teams in front of them, I mean, you're looking even at, going into next year. You're looking at the Anaheim Ducks and the LA Kings. Those are 2 teams in California you're going to have to beat out. And then you factor in the fact the teams that are playoff teams already in the Pacific Division. You have the 2 teams in Alberta, Calgary and Edmonton. I don't see them going anywhere next season. You have Vegas. You could argue maybe they're going down. You still have Vancouver, who kind of looks like they could be on the up next year. And then Seattle, and that's really it. Seattle is really the only team that I think is still worse in going into next year than the San Jose Sharks. And as age catches up to the Sharks, does it get even worse? I mean, we were talking about their goal differential this year. A -44. That's kind of hard to stomach. But again, when you're missing guys like LeBanc in the lineup and goaltending like Aiden Hill, I guess these are the results that you can expect. Going into next season, though, for the Sharks, I think there's room for optimism, but there is some question about what is this team? What is their identity? Is it LeBanc and Meyer and guys like Couture and Hurdle? I think so. But again, is there enough goal scoring? And I think that's really the big question that the new management team is going to have to figure out for the Sharks. And for the longest time, we know that Doug Wilson has been very much on the, we need to get bigger side of things, probably adding more sandpaper to this team over the summer, getting bigger bodies. We'll see if that mindset and that mentality changes with maybe a new general manager in there. So that's kind of what you're looking at for the Sharks. Again, I think the big question is goal scoring. Will they score enough goals? And do they need to add more goal scoring depth? I think the answer to that is yes. And is their goaltending good enough? And that comes to the question of a healthy Aiden Hill, returning James Reimer. Would you rather keep Capo Kakinen, who they got from Minnesota at the deadline? Those are the kind of questions that we're going to see answered here over the next couple months. But let me know what you guys think of the Sharks. Do you see them as a playoff team next season with guys like William Eklund coming in and, the return of guys healthy? Or do you see another season here as, this Pacific Division will probably get more competitive going into next year? Do you think it will be difficult for the Sharks to make the playoffs? Let me know. Guys, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again next time.